Okay, everybody. It's 2 past the hour. Thank you for your patience. We'll be starting the meeting shortly. So everyone knows, full disclosure for the benefit of our attendees, WAM colleagues, and others who cannot be here today, we are recording this event. So please bear that in mind when you activate your cameras, your audio, and put any questions into the chat. Today's chat will be curated, and we're very excited to have you ask questions of Dr. Donoviel from Trish. Shilpi will be giving you guys the ground rules and telling us how we're going to be able to proceed through this, ask questions, and so forth. The Shilpi, take it away.
Yes, hi, welcome everybody. We're super excited that you guys are all here. Just as we get started, some ground rules. For the first part of the talk, it would be great if you could do videos off and mics off, just so we can focus on the presentation. As you guys have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat box, and I will keep a note of all the questions that come in, and then towards the end of the presentation, you guys will have an opportunity to actually ask those questions. So be ready when I say your question and who said it. You can turn your video on, turn your mic on, and talk to Dr. Donoviel and ask your questions, and hopefully this can be a great and interactive process for you guys, and we're super excited to have you guys here. So thank you.
We are. Dr. Donoviel prefers a conversation over a traditional presentation. So we're going to keep it conversational. Dr. Donoviel and I will be chatting. I'll be asking her questions, and then it'll be your turn. So this should be fun, informative, informal, and really like a conversation. Welcome, everyone, to Women in Aerospace Medicine. We're so happy to have you. Just briefly, for those of you joining us for the first time, including Jules from the Netherlands, hi, thanks for being here. This is an initiative of AMSRO. We're a diversity initiative. We're here to try to engage the community, to ensure that minorities, women, female identifying members of the aerospace community have a voice and a forum that they can come to, that they have the opportunity to cultivate leadership in a supportive community and pursue academic excellence. So that's what we're all here to do. This is the leadership of this community so far. That's Melissa on the left. She's studying for her step 2 today. Me on the right, and our wonderful student leaders in the middle, including Shilpi, who's joining us today from Miami. This is World Space Week. Welcome to World Space Week, where there are thousands of events taking place across the globe, and I do mean thousands. Last year, there was more than 8,000 separate events. So we are one of those events, kicking it off today with today's talk with Dr. Donoviel. Tomorrow, just as an example of one event you can join, it's free of charge. The Mars Society Australia is kicking off the Space Health Symposium on how to thrive, not just survive. Please feel free, if you're in our particular hemisphere, to join them. The talks will be taking place during our evenings, their mornings, and vice versa. So you should have an opportunity to partake of that or many of the other events taking place worldwide. Dr. Astronaut Kjell Lindgren will join us with WashU AMSRO on the 16th at noon Central Time. Dr. Sawyer from UCSF is going to be joining us on November 7th. We're organizing an exciting speaker for December 12th, and astronaut Dottie Metcalf-Lindenberger, who's a wonderful, wonderful woman, is going to be joining us in January. So we hope you'll join us for that as well. And today, we're very happy to have Dorit Donoviel, who Shilpi is going to introduce.
Yes, we are super excited and super blessed that Dr. Donoviel has agreed to come give us an awesome presentation. She is the director for the Translational Research Institute for Space Health. And this is a huge NASA-funded innovation research that focuses on human health and space medicine. And she's also a professor in the Department of Farm and Chemical Biology at the Center for Space Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine. We are incredibly blessed to have her here today and give us a talk. So, take it away, you guys.
Absolutely. So, and on a personal note, Dorit has been extremely kind to me, given me lots of great advice, and helped me understand more about what Trish does and offers to the world. And she does this by doing a lot of science communication, outreach, writing great articles. I'll let her tell you more about what Trish does, since she's the expert on the subject, but just so you all know at base, TRISH is the Translational Research Institute for Space Health. It's a consortium. So Dr. Donoviel is a professor at Baylor College of Medicine, which sort of helps organize this collaborative effort between Caltech and Pasadena, MIT and Cambridge, Baylor, and everything that goes on down in Houston. And I'm going to ask now Dr. Donoviel to tell us more about why NASA needs TRISH and what TRISH does for the world at large.
Okay, so thanks everybody, and Shana, thanks so much for the kind invitation. I really am humbled, and I have to tell you, more so now than ever before, working remotely, we all need our village. We all need our support network, and whether it's remote or in person, you guys are my village. People who are just as excited and committed about discovery for space and in medicine are sort of what keep me going and get me up in the morning every day. So it is actually incredibly important for me to connect with you guys, and I'm really thrilled to share what we're doing at TRISH. So thank you. And so I really do want this to be a conversation, and I really appreciate that you've thought of some great questions. Okay, I'll start by answering the question. So before we go on, let me just explain what TRISH is. It is indeed a consortium. But what we are is we sort of think of ourselves as a mom and pop NASA, a more approachable NASA. NASA is a very large organization, tends to be very bureaucratic, as like most government organization. It's hard to crack through some of the bureaucracy and to get to people to listen to you and to answer your questions. And so we kind of make it more approachable. We sort of become the interface with NASA. But more importantly, what we're trying to do is cultivate a community of problem solvers. And what we try to do is bring in people from a whole variety of disciplines. So medicine, for sure, engineering, investors, healthcare, giant organizations that are doing healthcare delivery. We look at human factors organizations. We try to bring everybody in and, create a place where it's really a fun playground where we can solve problems. And so, and we don't just do this in terms of connecting and educating, although we do a lot of that as well. We actually put money behind certain projects. And so our budget is not huge, but it is substantial. It's about $20 million a year. And most of that, we're a virtual institute. We've been working virtually for the last 4 years since we began in October of 2016. So very little money goes towards overhead, and most of the money that we get from NASA, we turn around and we make grants. So it's almost like we're a mom and pop NASA, but we're also a mini NIH. We turn around and make grants to other people. So we get the money from NASA, and then we make sub-awards from that, and we give money to all kinds of academic groups as well as companies. At any given time, we have anywhere between 60 to 70 projects on our pipeline of research projects, and they're substantial grants. They range anywhere from $100K to over $1 million a year. So as you can see, the $1 million ones obviously are not very many of them, or we would eat up our entire portfolio. But we basically invest in all kinds of very interesting research dealing with humans in space, but not on the ISS. We've figured that out. We have been living on the International Space Station in low Earth orbit for the last 20 years, and guess what? People are perfectly healthy. They do quite well. They come back, and we're really not too concerned, even with the condition with the visual impairment and the SANS condition. It never actually escalated to a point where somebody's actually lost vision. So what we're really focused on is the mission to Mars, and that is an unprecedented challenge where humans will not be able to get resupply, they will not be able to evacuate due to a medical emergency, there'll be communication delays, everything that they need has to go with them. So a 3-year mission to Mars where they have to be completely autonomous, that is a whole new paradigm that nobody's ever been able to assess before. So our organization, and why NASA needs TRISH, is really focused on that sort of long-range vision of going to Mars. And NASA also, we're partnered very closely with the Human Research Program. So we get our funding directly from the Human Research Program. So they also fund a lot of research, and they have tremendous investments across the board, a lot of different areas. But what they realize is they tend to end up with groupthink. They tend to have certain assumptions about how to solve certain problems, and the same usual suspects come back and are very successful in getting grants. These are folks who've been funded by NASA for a very long time, 20 years probably, or even longer. And, you know, these folks are terrific and they do great work. But sometimes the really hard problems require somebody completely with fresh eyes. And so NASA created Trish to really look outside the box. And in fact, I like to tell people, we're not even in the box or outside the box. We're supposed to operate without a box. We're supposed to really engage new problem solvers to come in and work with the tried and true regular investigators and really challenge the kinds of assumptions that we've been making, even myself included. I've been part of this community for a really long time. So the whole idea is to really challenge the assumptions we're making about how is it that we're going to provide autonomous healthcare in space. And so for this group in particular, we'll talk more about the medicine, but we really do approach it from a more holistic perspective: food, behavior health, human factors, how to interact with the environment within the spacecraft, the robotics, etc. So I apologize, Shayna, that was a really long-winded answer, but I wanted to give everybody sort of the baseline.
That's a great answer. And in fact, I learned some stuff from that answer. I always thought, you know, yeah, we're operating in our own boxes, but this box doesn't have a lid. You have no box, which I think is great. And I think a more approachable NASA is what many people need. You know, not all of us have been working with NASA since we were 18 years old or had parents that work with NASA. We want to be able to get there. And I like the thought that Trish can help us be a conduit. Speaking of that, you know, we're interested in what Trish has accomplished, you know, some of the findings, some of the current research, and what's happening now that our members might be able to get active and engage in.
Yeah, so that's great. So since the start of Trish, which was about 4 years ago, our first year's budget was $3 million. So they didn't give us a whole hell of a lot of money in the beginning. So we're really talking over the last 3 years. And as you know, research, you know, takes a while to get off the ground, but I'm really proud to say that since the beginning of Trish, we have now funded, let me think of the number, it's 83 projects, 83
Wow.
research projects. We have just in this past year, in March and April, delivered 34 completed projects to NASA. So 34 have finished. And the most important thing is the delivery to NASA, because as you can figure, we really kind of connect the dots in a unique way. And so while NASA is sort of trudging along, doing their human research roadmap and funding a lot of research to sort of reduce the risks, the things that we bring forward tend to be a little more out there. And so we have to really connect the dots for NASA. So I'll give you an example of one project that we recently delivered to NASA. So this is Bob Langer. He basically devised a stomach resident device. So it's a pill that you swallow, and once it's in the stomach, it opens up and essentially starts to deliver in a controlled manner microbes, healthy microbes. So for example, we're very interested in the microbiome for overall health. And we recently had a microbiome workshop. If you didn't catch it, it was superb. It's on our website. We posted all the lectures. It was outstanding. So if you didn't know this, you've been hiding under a rock, but the microbes that live on our bodies control our health in so many different ways. So the future is not just about the genome and how our genes are controlling our health. It's about the microbes that live on our bodies and how we can actually get them to affect our overall well-being. And so the concern for long duration space flight is they're going to have they will have no fresh foods. They will not have fresh foods. And so everything they'll take with them will be a packaged food. They'll have probably fairly limited probiotic capability. Think about the number of pills you would have to bring for a 3-year mission in order to maintain even your gut health. And so this device can live in your gut essentially and deliver healthy microbes. And so this is one project that's kind of out of the box, okay, that NASA hasn't considered. But his next project, which we just kicked off about a year ago, and he competed for this, it wasn't just a done deal that he would get renewed, is the microbes can be made to actually make pharmaceuticals or biologics, and so, or vitamins. So some vitamins are very labile, and you can't even send along, you know, a vitamin that would last the whole mission. And so that's actually a problem. So imagine that you can actually send a microbe that would be making, as needed, a vitamin or a particular pharmaceutical. So this is the next sort of big step in manipulating microbes in order to improve your health. The Earth application for this technology, and I'm just giving you this one example, really started with people who really should be on, who have mental health conditions like schizophrenia, et cetera, who should be on long-term delivery of psych meds and really tend to not consistently take their meds. And so a pill like this swallowed would be releasing slowly over a period of time the psych meds. And so we took a technology that was being developed for Earth and we basically spun it for space flight. That's just one example. And so the accomplishments that we brought forward, I'll give you another couple of examples. Radiation. Everybody knows that the radiation effects are going to be sort of the elephant in the room. There was recently a study that was just published. There was a probe on the moon, and was it India or Japan? I can't remember, Shayna, but they sent a probe on the moon, and they were able to determine that the radiation exposure is much higher than they had anticipated. And so we are concerned about being able to shield for galactic cosmic rays. We know we can shield from the sun, the protons, and protons are a massive component of the galactic cosmic rays that come in. Protons, you can block those with water or some shielding. But all the rest of the heavy ion particles, which are a much lower but consistent dose over a 3-year period, we anticipate that there will be a cumulative effect that could really damage a lot of cells and proteins, as well as the DNA. So how did we approach this? It's very different than NASA. So NASA's been doing a wonderful job looking at rodents, mostly mice and rats, and they've been assessing a lot of risks and understanding, okay, if you zap mice or rats with a certain amount of GCR, you know, 6 months later, you assess them for behavioral health, you assess them, you look at their hearts, you look at their bones, their muscles, and we know that there's effects. There's absolutely effects. They've done a lot less on countermeasures. And so there's very little out there really about effective countermeasures. And so what we wanted to do, we have 2 things that are really unique around radiation effects. Number one, we looked at low organisms. What I mean by this is even lower than mice and rats. We looked at E. coli and we looked at fruit flies because they're so easy to manipulate them genetically and do a massive screen for genes that can resist radiation effects. So we're looking for genes that if you can actually target them either using nucleotides, or even with pharmaceuticals, if there's a way to regulate them, you can actually confer resistance on the humans. And so NASA's not looked at this. They've not looked at E. coli. They've not looked at fruit flies. And so these are two of the projects that we recently delivered to NASA. And guess what? There are quite a number of brand new genes, also tardigrades. So tardigrades was another one. We took the tardigrades genes, which we know those are conferring resistance to radiation, and we put them in fruit flies. And we were able to demonstrate that these not only can confer resistance to radiation in the fruit flies and the E. coli, they have human homologs. So now the next step is to genetically manipulate the human homologs in human cells and see whether we can now identify brand new targets to make you more resistant. That's one approach. The other one, which I'm really excited about, is to take healthy humans, and like you and me or anybody who's about to go to Mars, you would get blood cells from them, just a regular blood cell draw. And you can, using the white blood cells, you can now generate primordial progenitor cells. Essentially, you can de-differentiate those lymphocytes into primordial pluripotent stem cells. So these are stem cells that can now become any kind of tissue. And the technology has moved so far along, and the NIH has invested in it. It is now ready and ripe to be picked for the space program. So we just funded 5 massive projects. This is our tissue chip solicitation that we just closed. We're going to take normal, healthy cells. These are not transformed cells or not cancer cells. These are normal, healthy human cells. And we can now differentiate those pluripotent progenitor cells into different kinds of tissues and organs. And these organs on a chip, essentially, you can make them become almost a microphysiological system. So you can differentiate into lung cells that will actually transport oxygen and CO2 across membranes. You can get differentiated cardiac cells that are actually beating in culture. You can even make neurons like optic nerves. You can make blood-brain barriers. And now we can take those human cells that are mimicking organs, we can expose them to radiation, and get this, we can actually take your cells and expose your cells into radiation and understand exactly what your susceptibility would be versus another person, okay? And not only that, we can now administer countermeasures in vitro on these organ systems coming from you and determine whether a particular countermeasure will actually be effective for you if you were to go to space someday. So these are just some of the literally no box approaches that we were able to bring forth to NASA. I hope that was a good example.
Those were great examples for all of our student doctors. I hope as you go forth in your careers that you never give an antibiotic without giving a probiotic. Please, 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 please. Wiping out people's gut flora can affect mood, sleep, memory, all kinds of cognitive and physiologic functions. So we're becoming more and more mindful of that as we proceed in medicine and research, and certainly in space, where we're still coming to learn about the microbiome of isolated and confined environments, and it's a moving target. How all of these are really interesting, and I know that they're very interesting to this particular group of people, researchers in aerospace. How can we support Trish, and how can we become involved in this research? I mean, many of us are not at the level where we're putting in grants quite yet. We hope to be there someday. So how else could we become involved in this really cutting edge research?
Million ways. Thanks for asking that, and we invite you all. The whole point of Trish, what we have developed, and we hope to grow with your help, and we invite all of you, you would be a very important part of it, is really an innovation ecosystem for space health. You do not have to be a funded investigator to contribute. Absolutely not. There's opportunity for students, for residents, for doctors, for anybody who wants to become involved. I'll just name some of them, okay? So for example, everything that we do is free and really brings forward the best and the brightest minds in the whole world. And so you should absolutely sign up for our newsletter and make sure that you get all the notifications about all of our workshops. So we just had the microbiome workshop. We had one recently on torpor. Okay, now this was really like, it actually made a lot of people queasy at NASA. They're like, what? You're going to put people in hibernation? And this is the kind of stuff we love. Okay, so let me explain a little bit about that. We did invite people who were studying red squirrels and bears, and we even had a emergency medicine doctor from Alaska who actually talked about how medically putting people in a stasis is actually really important. So it's not about putting people in real hibernation. It's really understanding if you can lower the metabolic rate during certain times, that might be a good thing. And we know that's true whenever there's heart failure or heart attacks, or we have, brain damage, things like that. So there's definitely opportunities to cross borders. So in addition to these workshops, we did the Red Wrist School, which is really interesting. So come to the workshops. That's an easy one. Contribute questions. We also have what we call the Orbit, and it's a platform we use within a commercial off-the-shelf product where people can actually post things, connect things. You can join certain groups. There's student groups. There's the radiation group. There's the people interested in molecular stuff. There's people interested in human factors. You could connect there to people who are funded by us, people who are reviewing proposals by us. People post all kinds of opportunities when they have a job posting, etc. Okay, in addition to that, you are more than welcome to join our monthly calls. We call these the Trish Orbit Rendezvous. It's named after the Lunar Orbit Rendezvous when it was a maneuver when they did the Apollo mission. So once a month, you're more than welcome to join our tour meetings where our investigators talk about their projects, or we'll invite some of our scientific advisory board members to come and talk. Like last time a week ago, we had a tour meeting and we invited Susan Alpert, who's an MD PhD, who was at the FDA for about 10 years. And before that, she was head of all medical devices at Medtronic. So she talked about regulatory paths for new novel medical products. And so, you can interact with these people who, you would have connections to or access to ask questions. And so you're absolutely welcome to participate in our monthly calls. And then, we have opportunities every once in a while for educational things. So for example, we recently signed an MOU with SEDS, and it's Space Educational, I can't remember the organization, but it's basically reaching out to undergraduates. And so it's inspiring the next generation, even down from you guys. So if you are graduate students or medical students or residents, it's, talking to them, or during when the pandemic came along, we felt so bad for all the folks who were at home with their kids and no school. We ran a series called Life on Mars, where we brought in experts that gave a live, essentially interactive Twitter feed essentially to kids at home about what would it be like to go to Mars and what would be some of the issues. So we can feature you could, participate in some of our events or educational events. And going forward, we have some really cool plans, which I'd love to tell you about if we have time. The Mars Mission Simulator, where we think anybody can join and start to play around with mission scenarios. And that's another way that you can interact. Stay tuned to that. And so if you get on our mailing list, you will find out how you can contribute. Oh, last thing, we had a brand new project. Larry Pinsky from University of Houston was trying to measure the radiation levels on polar flights. We wanted to see whether people who were flying over the poles, which really have the least amount of protection from radiation, we're getting a reasonable dose of radiation to simulate what's happening in space. And so Larry was looking for people who were flying those flights anyways, because we didn't want to pay him, 25 times to go to China and back. And so people took his dosimeter. He had like 8 dosimeters or 10 dosimeters, and we just gave them to people to fly if they were going to China or Japan. This was before the pandemic. So you can sign up to carry a dosimeter if you want to. So those are the opportunities that come up on how you guys can contribute.
That's awesome. For anyone who's curious, I will include the link to, is it the Student Exploration Development of Space? Is that SEDS, or is that something else?
I think that's right. I think
Okay.
that's right. But if you reach out to me, my email is just Donoviel at BCM Baylor College of Medicine.edu. I will connect you with Rachel, who's heading up the SEDS collaboration. She's about to set up some massive thing with SEDS. There'll be opportunities for guest speakers or writing little blogs or articles and things like that. And we'd love to have you guys participate.
Yeah, that would be great. And if you are, when travel resumes, if you're the kind of person who wants to carry a dosimeter, you'll be in good company. All the Apollo astronauts carry dosimeters to the moon and through space. So we'd have some measurements of the kind of radiation that humans get out there. If they hadn't, we would have no idea until the Chang'e landed in 2019 in the von Karman crater on the far side of the moon and started doing active radiation measurements. Prior to that, the only information we had was from the Apollo era dosimeters. So feel free to sign up to carry those dosimeters if that's something you enjoy. So before we get to Q&A, which I know that everyone wants to do, I'd like to ask you about this article. I loved this article. So we will share this article with everyone through the list about the wisdom that Dr. Donoviel imparted via Authority Magazine. I am curious if you actually got in trouble for saying that typically, though men are at the helm, there'll be far more talented and productive women in position number 2. Did you get in trouble, in fact, for saying?
You know, I didn't. I think mostly because my boss didn't know about this article and he never read it. I wasn't really referring to him, actually.
No, of course.
Well, no, it's really funny. You know, I think this really speaks to what we do to ourselves as women. Okay, so I've been working with a speech coach. You know, we actually have our institute's about to be renewed by NASA, and so it's funded in 2 6-year increments. And so they come in and they typically, every time you have a big program at NASA, they do a midpoint review. So I have been working with a speech coach a little bit, and she read this and she said, "This is so typical. Women always apologize or say things that undermine their message." She said, "I wish you didn't say this. I wish you didn't say, 'I know I will get in trouble for this.'" She said, "You should have said, 'You often see this in STEM leadership teams, period. And don't undermine yourself.'" And it is so true. So the only person I got in trouble with was with my speech coach about this. So, but it is true. I have to confess, I have imposter syndrome a lot. Like some days I'm like, "Oh, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe they trust me with this." Of course I am like the right person for the job. I am the right person for the job. Things have been going so well. I will say that before me, there was a male director of the Institute, and he left, and it did not work out with him. And so in my case, it's true. I did have to step in and sort of fix up a mess. It's true. I did massive cleanup the first 2 years, and I brought in a whole new team. There were people who were let go. I brought in a whole new team, and I'm really happy to say, to me, I think the Institute is doing incredibly well. And so I didn't get in trouble. I said the truth. And I think in some cases, I tend to be a bit unfiltered, which you either love or you hate. So it is what it is. I sort of tell it like it is. Sometimes in positions of leadership, you do have to bite your tongue and be more political and more astute. And so I am filtering just a little bit more, but there you have it.
We can be called in for cleanup, but ideally we'd be called in so there would be no need for cleanup. What recommendations do you have? So we're here to help cultivate leadership.
Yeah.
What recommendations do you have for women and for some men here who are here to support us and be good leaders themselves as to how to approach the process of rising through the ranks of leadership to many of us with imposter syndrome, and PS to all you out there, it doesn't get better with the more degrees you have.
Yeah.
I don't know if it gets worse, but it certainly doesn't get better. So as like your business card says, MD, PhD, continued on refrigerator, the sense of imposter syndrome won't actually go away, because
It's true.
this is in here, not in the real world. Recommendations for addressing that internally and externally to explain, no, you should hire me now because I'm going to make sure it's a clean start.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I'm going to confess, I'm 55 years old, and it is true. When you get older and you've been through it a few times, you've been around for a while, you do get some wisdom as you get older. It is so true. So first of all, I'll start by saying you've got to cultivate a village around you, even if it's just a handful of people who know you professionally, but also have your best interests at heart. I would not be where I am today without a few absolutely key people. I would say 5, really, really lucky. And I cultivated those relationships. I saw something in these people. They had a perspective, and they saw something in me. And so it's not about just taking from them. I try to give to them as well when they needed something back. But you've got to have people who believe in you, because you will have a lot of moments of doubt. And if you don't have somebody to text and say, I'm feeling really, really insecure today, and they talk you through it. They talk you through it. I'm not talking about therapists. I'm talking about people who you respect and know you professionally. That was absolutely critical for me. I would not be here today without it. The second thing I would say is ask those people to really be honest with you. And because a lot of times they'll be afraid to really tell you when they see something that you're doing. Like, for example, apologizing when you're saying something that's true, but may not be well received by everybody. Apologizing for it actually totally undermines you. I need people to tell me, don't do that, okay? Like your friends will say, oh, great, you got an article in Authority magazine, yay. Okay, that's nice, but it really doesn't help you. You want people to actually give you the critical feedback, but they won't do it unless you truly, truly, truly accept it in a good way. Like don't get defensive when they give you that. So create a space for people to give you really good feedback, true feedback, because I think otherwise you have blind spots and you can't fix them. So in particular, when you're running an organization, it's really weird. When I transitioned, I used to be part of the management team, and now I'm the leader. And all of a sudden my jokes are funnier. Like, I know I'm not that funny, okay? But people are afraid to be truthful with you. There is an element where people sort of don't really always tell you the truth. You've got to have people tell you the truth. That is absolutely key, even if you don't like it, even if you've really screwed up. And so that is essential. To me, those are really key points.
That's all very, very true. And also, taking compliments is often harder than criticism. I know what to do. They're actually two sides of the same thing. Both of them tell you how close you are to where you want to be. So, someone gives you a compliment. Oh, your great article in Authority magazine. You're like, okay, thank you very much. But there's really nothing you can do with it. You can kind of stick it in your pocket for a rainy day. Someone says, this article is trash. You dropped the ball. Everything is on fire and it's all your fault. You're like, okay, that's actionable. Tell me more. So, it's never shy away from criticism. Certainly don't shy away from compliments, but never shy away from criticism. It is a gift to you. It's a gift to us to help us develop ourselves and to encourage people to be truthful with us, right?
Yeah, you can't let people get in your head though. I mean, not everybody's going to love everything you do. Okay. So and I'll be honest with you guys, I've let a couple of very negative people into my head, and it's taken me a really long time to get rid of those little negative voices in my head. But you want to hear those negative voices. You want to hear them because usually there's a kernel of something to learn in there. There is something that you can take away and make into a positive, or learn from it, or grow from it. But don't give it more real estate than just, okay, thanks. I take that into, consideration and move on, because, all of us, me too, I dwell. And this is, I dwell on the negative. Like 50 people could tell you your article's great. One person tells you it's crap. And of course your mind goes there. Why is it crap? Well, okay, let me take away what is the learning here. But you go back to your village and you say, okay, this is the criticism I received. Is this true? And it's usually has to do with the person's point of view, right? Like everybody has a certain point of view. Some people are just cynical. And so make sure that you don't give negative people too much power and to be in your head for too much time.
Yeah, that's a good point too. It is a balancing act and a work in progress, but yeah, everyone has something to teach. And just before we get to the Q&A, I wanted to put this out there for everybody who may not have seen it already. This was published yesterday. And it's a great article, an interview more or less with Kathy Lueders, who's the manager of NASA, the NASA Commercial Space Program, the first woman to hold this position, who says that the future of space is female, and that women are driving this innovation as engineers, as leaders, as physicians, as researchers. And Dorit, before we go to the Q&A, do you have any comments or thoughts about this trend?
Yeah, so I love this. It's very hopeful. I also want to say something cautionary about this. I also read articles about the fact that the pandemic is actually setting us back a little bit because of the economic ramifications, the fact that a lot of kids are not going back to school. I think we are seeing women affected a little bit more economically in the workplace because of the pandemic, and I'm terrified that we're going to be moving backwards a little bit in time. So I guess what I'm saying is, yes, I think it's hopeful. I think the future is female, and we could talk about the reasons why I think the future in space is female, but we have to be really guarded here. We cannot just rest on our laurels, because I think our place in society is not set in stone. I think that we need to continue to show the value that women bring, the ability to work more collaboratively, I think, in most situations with others, and the diversity of opinions of teams that have women and people of color, and diversity of disciplines, and diversity of upbringing. All of those things are really important. So I do think that, Shayna, I do think the future is female. So I can tell you, but I caution all of us to be guarded, because there's always forces at play, right? That are more comfortable with the status quo. So we are making inroads. Absolutely, we are. And I'm so thrilled about Kathy Lueders. She's terrific. And I'm sorry to say she's replacing two men who have come in quick succession behind her. So, I'm really thrilled with her appointment. So I want to talk about the fact that what we see is a little bit concerning, because when we started to look at our numbers, in terms of the percent of our investigators that get funding who are women, and the percent of our trainees who get funding, because we have fellowships for postdoctoral fellows and at the earlier stage. Something happens, and I talk about it in this article, something happens between the trainee stage and the independent investigator. We get 50% of our trainees female and 30% of our PIs. And so there's attrition, there's a loss there. And we're not unique. NIH sees the same problem. So it is really hard for women to establish themselves as independent. I mean, I think 30% is terrific. I'm sure it's a huge improvement over a decade ago, and I don't know the numbers, but 30% is still not good enough. So I think the reason for a lot of it, one could just be choices. You know, some women do choose not to continue. Maybe they choose to stay home with kids. I think that's terrific. But is there enough support for these women so that if they wanted to do the independent investigator, or, you know, be a leader in science and in industry, is there enough childcare support by partners, support by the organizations that are hiring them, allowing them to do more flexible work hours? I think now after the pandemic, perhaps yes, that, you know, they are able to do that. So I guess that's my answer to the question.
Oh, that's a great answer. And this is something that we'll all encounter the longer you go on in your career. People will start turning to you for leadership, particularly when everything is falling apart. And they'll say, oh, you know, you're such a great leader. Why don't you come in and help clean this all up? And you'll say, well, I am capable of that. And I'm so grateful that you trust me with that particular action. What I'm more than happy to do is take on an overall leadership role and see to it that this is cleaned up. But if we agree to be responsible for quitting our jobs, leaving the workplace, scaling back every time there's a disaster, every time something needs to get fixed, we are not going to make the progress that we not only deserve, but that all of society needs us to make. Also published yesterday a report that women are leaving the workplace in droves in the pandemic. Also true anecdotally is that I've had many patients crying in my office. They're there for pain, but when I ask them what hurts, the answer is, this hurts, this hurts, this hurts. I have headaches, I'm depressed because I thought I had an egalitarian, equal relationship with my partner, and it turns out I do not. It turns out that I have to do all the childcare while we're both working from home, and I don't know what to do or say about it. And unfortunately, there's nothing I can prescribe that will fix that in pill form. I've been sending a lot of people to therapy, talk therapy which is now more and more commonly done over telehealth. The rise of telehealth has been one of the upsides to the situation we're in, that I can actually get people in to see someone and talk to it. But the number of people going to couples counseling to try and resolve the fact that there is still an unequal balance of responsibility in the home, leading to an unequal balance of leadership in the fields. And that's something we're all going to contend with together. All the men, all the women, everyone in this room is part of this conversation. And we are your community. Let's talk about how to support everybody, because having any one group flee the field to clean up the mess is not what we want. The point is not that it's women. The point is that's not what we want, period. So on that note, what do we want? What do we want to talk about? Let's get to our Q&A time. Feel free to turn your videos on, and Shilpi's going to call on you and put your questions in the chat. And when it's your turn to answer or ask your question, unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I just want to take a second to say thank you again to Dr. Donoviel for such a wonderful and thoughtful conversation. I know a lot of what you said really resonates very personally for a lot of us, and I know I and many of my colleagues that are here today will hold the advice that you shared with us close as we work towards and trailblaze towards our goals, and we are very grateful to have you in our village. So that being said, everybody is welcome to turn their videos on, and if you have any questions, throw them in the chat box and I will call on you guys, and you can turn your mics off and ask your questions to Dr. Donoviel directly. So the first question we had is about genetic and cellular manipulation. Jamil, if you want to turn your video on and ask your question, that would be great.
Hi, Dr. Donoviel. How are you? Yeah, so earlier when you were talking about genetic manipulation, I was just wondering if that's something that has been or could be studied on the ISS. And I think the second part was if the radiation there is strong enough to be comparable to controlled studies.
Yeah, that's a great question. So first part of your question is, you're talking about in humans on the ISS?
Yeah.
Yeah, so astronauts don't like to be guinea pigs. So the answer is probably no. But having said that, there are several nucleotide-based approaches. I'm not talking about actually going in and doing gene therapy, but nucleotide-based therapeutics that will downregulate genes using, like, you know, RNA or DNA or single-stranded DNA. There are things in FDA clinical trials right now for a variety of indications. So the future is nucleotide-based approaches, which will have an effect on the genome. Am I going to actually do gene therapy on your somatic cells? No, but I will be able to give you a nucleotide-based therapeutic that will probably reversibly affect you in some way to reduce maybe your insulin resistance or something like that in the future. This is coming. It's happening. So believe it or not, on the ISS right now, those astronauts are really, really healthy. You know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And you're certainly not going to give anything to humans who are actually doing quite well. So this is about Mars. This is about a 3-year mission where you are going to get radiation exposure that is cumulative and nobody's ever seen before. Nobody's exposed humans to this level of radiation for this long a period, okay? The experiment's just not been done. Nobody's able to do it. So what we want to do is we want to be able to be ready for the unknown unknowns. So say on a mission to Mars, you get a massive dose or a cumulative dose of GCR, and now all of a sudden your bone just becomes so porous. Your osteoclasts are just chewing away at your bone and you can't make enough bone, where you just touch something and you start to have bone breaks. This is a 3-year mission to Mars. It could happen. It could happen. We just don't know. So imagine having the capability, and this is quite possible, this is not science fiction, to be able to make a nucleotide-based therapeutic that will block your osteoclasts, okay? It will just knock them out, knock out your osteoclasts. Okay, and actually there are therapies right now that can do that, okay? They're Boniva and other types of osteoporotic drugs given by injection, or actually no, Boniva I think is a pill, once a month pill. We can do those things. We can actually prevent that. So that's the first part of your question. The second part of the question is, on the ISS, they're still protected by our atmosphere. They're still protected by the magnetosphere. So they are not receiving the radiation dose that they're going to get on the way to Mars. On the moon is a different story. This is why we want to go to the moon. Now, right now, the mission scenarios on on the moon really don't call for more than, I think it starts with like up to 2 weeks. And while the radiation dose will be more than the ISS cumulatively, is nowhere near 3 years. So we do need to understand what happens to humans on the moon. And, you know, frankly, I wouldn't want to send my kids to the moon. I think the radiation will be quite tremendous, although, you know, we can protect from protons. And probably where we're going to go with that for protection from radiation, we can't really shield it. It's too much mass to shield for galactic cosmic rays. We'd probably be burying underground. So, you know, the lunar dust on the moon is toxic. I don't think I want to be digging in the moon, but on Mars, potentially one can envision going underground. And there are actually like lots of caves and things underground. So if you haven't watched this, Discovery Channel has some great videos about the Mars surface and what we've discovered, and there's like massive tunnel systems already, sort of like volcanic caves, where humans probably could live underground and protect themselves from radiation. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really detailed.
Yeah, I
you.
actually did have a similar question. We're making, it looks like we're making microscopic tardigrade slash fly models to study radiation in. Is this a CRISPR-Cas gene editing thing, or is this a sort of vaccine type vector thing where we're actually
I think it's CRISPR genetic manipulation. All the lower organism stuff, with the exception of E. coli. E. coli just like miraculously just, mutate. But there is a group there's two groups that we funded that have nucleotide-based approaches. One is out of Ames, and his name is, of course, I can think of the other one in Colorado. I don't know why when I'm on the spot I blank out on people's names, but we have two funded investigators who are making nucleotide-based approaches for anything, for any virus or anything that you would need, any target that you would need. You can make these nucleotide-based therapeutics. Chatterjee, and Chatterjee is the last name of the investigator in Colorado, and it's, God, why am I blanking out on the fellow in Ames? But anyway, she can make these therapeutics within 4 days. Okay. And what was so cool about this platform is we pivoted her to the pandemic. So she's actually making SARS-2 COVID related therapeutics. So imagine an unknown on the way to Mars. You got like a brand new virus or a brand new pathogen or a brand new thing that you need. All you need is the nucleotide sequence, and she can make you a therapeutic. And these things are taken up by the cells. And so there's already been a lot of proof of concept, but it's a platform that you would be able to use on the fly and make your therapeutic within 4 days. That's the idea.
That's pretty amazing and very hopeful because, and this is just for all the space health nerds out there, modeling how radiation is going to affect human beings, the human being as a whole, and any particular organ inside that human being is incredibly hard. In fact, we can model it, but actually proving that it's going to work is nearly impossible because ionizing radiation follows the inverse square law. So how far whatever radiation you're studying, solar particle events, galactic cosmic is going to go has to do with the density at the point in the body. So we can use flies, we can use a porcine model, we can use whatever model we want, but the fact is that tissue has a totally different density. And that organ is at a totally different depth in that animal model. So we won't really know how the human body is going to respond to lunar doses of radiation or deep space doses of radiation until we get there, which is terribly disturbing. So in trying to prepare for that, we need to be able to be proactive and say, okay, where this much radiation is coming in, we're going to have to start shielding for it in this way. We're going to be finding that out on the fly. All right, next question.
So next question is about Trish and the challenges you might have faced with the pandemic, asked by Jules. So Jules, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, good morning, good evening, Jules here. Thanks for having this conversation with us. And so I guess perhaps some of the positive byproducts of this pandemic, if we can speak of positive, is that we now live up to some similar aspects of space travel or long duration space travel, and by living in isolation, of course. And hearing you say that Trish was already a virtual organization, and I assume you all knew very well how to work together virtually already. What was the biggest challenge for Trish in this pandemic, or what do you foresee to be the biggest one in the near future? Thank you.
Thanks, Jules. Great question. It's been unbelievably remarkable how easy it was for us to transition from working. We were already a remote organization, a virtual organization. We have a very small footprint, and people would come to the office and, work together when they wanted to, or they wanted to work from home, they could work from home. And we have people from all over. So actually, Einar Sawyer, who's speaking to you in November, is a member of the Trish team as well. She's at UCSF. We have somebody at Caltech, we have somebody at Harvard, and we have somebody at MIT. And so we didn't miss a beat going to fully virtual. And in fact, we were able to have, we were able to fund everything, get all our solicitations out on time, have all our reviews, have all the selections. We were able to have 4 different virtual conferences. We were already doing virtual conferences, the microbiome, the torpor, we had 2 radiation risk tool, we had 4 different things all during the last 6 months. We were able to do this because we were already doing everything virtually. So in that sense, we didn't miss a beat. The other thing is, what was so interesting is that all of our investigators were shut down. The labs, all the universities shut down. The whole country in the US was shut down. People were not able to come into the lab. The only people who were allowed back into the lab were people working on COVID-related things that had funding. So guess what we did? We pivoted 10 of our projects to COVID, okay? 10 of them. And so we quickly got on the call, and this is the benefit of getting, having really good connections with your people. We got on the phone with everybody and we said, who's working on something that can do COVID? And we had 10 investigators come in. They added specific aims to their projects, okay? We gave, in some cases, we gave a little bit of money, like 50K or 100K. In other cases, we gave 300K. And so what this did is we were able to get these people back in the lab. They could do their space health research as well as the COVID research. And so it got the work started up again. And so we were able to get people back in the lab. The work could continue, again, very carefully according to how the universities are running it. NASA was thrilled because they were shut down completely. And so our people are actually able to move things along. Now, what that caused, Jules, is that my team practically killed themselves, because you can imagine we had to get new proposals, we had to get them reviewed, across the board. The other thing we had to do is assess the delays. NASA wanted to know, okay, what's going to happen with all the delays? We have anywhere between 60 to 70 projects. And so each and every investigator, we had to go in and find out, what were you delayed? The radiation facility and the NASA Space Radiation Facility was shut down. The NASA analog facility was shut down. How did that affect all of our PIs? So in answer to your question, the bad thing about the pandemic is burnout. We just killed ourselves. We're exhausted. And in fact, a week ago, I had all hands and we played a game. This is really fun. You guys should look at this. It's called Watson Adventures. Highly recommend them. They did a sort of a scavenger hunt through museums all over the world, and our team did that. And together, it was the one fun activity we've done in the last 6 months because everybody's so tired. So the thing about the pandemic and working virtually is it's nonstop. It's just 24/7, and you really got to start telling people quit working so much. Really, you need to start taking care of yourself, because it tends to bleed into your personal life. So, hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. It did, and great pivot, by the way. Thanks. Bye.
So I have a quick follow-up to that regarding the pandemic. I know a lot of our members in WAM especially are actively looking for opportunities to contribute to research and development, especially in this field. And I know the pandemic has completely changed the climate of work and opportunities that might be available to us. So I was wondering if you maybe had suggestions for ways in which we can continue being active and remaining involved, and ways to find opportunities, because as you mentioned, this is our time to not become complacent and keep working. And so we wanted to hear what you thought the best way would be for our members to find and seek opportunities so that we can keep making an impact in this field throughout this difficult time.
So thanks for that, Shilpi. And actually, I've been wanting to do this, and I think we need to step up and just get it done. So I can't tell you how many people have reached out to me saying, do you have any internships? Everything's sort of dried up. NASA is not going to allow visitors on its center. They just won't. All the NASA centers, I think Houston now may be going to 75%, or maybe they're at 75%. But they're just very conservative about letting people on campus. And so we are virtual. So we don't actually have any place for people to come and work. But there's a lot of stuff you can do virtually. You can do a literature survey, you can crunch data, you could be a subject in a research study, you can, write articles for education, you can help us get the word out, you can write a blog thing. There's lots of things that could be done remotely. And so so we have somebody who leads our education. She's our education and communication officer, Rachel Dempsey. And so if you send me an email, I will connect you with her. But what I've told her, we actually, in our orbit, in our community page, we have a trainee page. Or what we need to do is develop a list of develop a place where people can say, okay, here's what I need people to do. Anybody want to do this? Sort of crowdsource the brain power that you guys all have. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. So I alluded to the Mars mission simulator. We want to do a Mars mission simulator where you can actually like really challenge yourself in terms of a potential scenario. So, okay, it's just like a medical case, right? Patient presents with, you know, cough and fever. Okay, triage, right? Something similar like that. Same thing, but in space. So now it's slightly different, the kinds of conditions that you're able to consider, right? So triaging them and figuring out what you would do, or if there's a toxic gas leak. So we want people to develop scenarios. You know, people who have medical background, what would be an interesting scenario on space flight? So give us a list of, you know, 20 medical scenarios on a mission to Mars and have fun with it. And we would love to have a database of these types of things. Or for example, you know, what would be a wish list for the types of foods that one would want to take, you know, because NASA has a list of foods that they're going to provide, but right now I just don't think we're going to be able to provide, you know, the diversity and the kinds of food that they're currently used to, because they're getting resupply, like, you know, practically once a month. So on the way to Mars, you know, do people want to talk about, you know, what kinds of foods one could reasonably provide in a small space, and how would one enhance the behavioral health aspects, for example. So I would love there to be a place where, and this was our vision for our orbit community, where people can have a dialogue. The problem is we're a really lean team. Rachel is just one person. So if somebody wanted to step up and moderate this thing and run it, we would take them on. They could be part of Trish. We probably can't pay you very much. We can maybe pay you a little bit. But if you wanted to step up and moderate this thing, heck yeah, come on board. So there's all kinds of ways to contribute.
That's great. Actually, WHAM, we can't pay anybody, but Shilpi and everybody else has put together a membership form so that we can find out who needs mentors and who needs, you know, who needs mentees. And we're trying to do that here. So we may be able to help. We'll be in touch about that. We definitely have another question from, speaking of mentees, I think one of my STEM mentees out in Civil Air Patrol, Nevada, Shilpi.
Yeah, so we actually have a couple questions. So I'm just going to go in order as how they came up. So there's a question about data transmission between the astronauts. So Christine, if you want to turn your video on and mic and ask the question.
Hi. Yeah, so after hearing what Jamil had to say about that, I kind of brought up this question about if we want to not use animal models and actually use the astronaut data, how do we get access to that data if we were to start a research project? Or how do the current people at Trish actually get access to the raw data from the astronauts?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Christine, and I wish I had a lovely answer for you. You can get it. It'll probably take a month of Sundays, as you can imagine. It's called LSAH. It's the Longitudinal Surveillance of Astronaut Health. I don't know if you guys know it. So
I do have a project, and that's where it ended because I couldn't get the data from LSAH. So
exactly. Okay. So it is really hard to get the data from them. Okay. And so here's two options. Number one, sometimes getting data from an analog population is much easier. So NASA has run lots of analog studies, like for example, the Mars 500 study, where they locked up, 500 days, six participants. There was a US-based investigator that did some monitoring of sleep and cognitive and behavioral outcomes. So you could ask him for the data if you wanted to share. I don't know what your research interests are, or there's internationals who did other studies. There's also studies in Antarctica. So the best thing to do if you want to do a data crunching, if you have a hypothesis and you have a certain thing that you want to look at, is to connect with somebody who's collected that data. The problem with that, sometimes the IRBs, when they were consented for very specific things. So if you wanted to do something with the data outside of what was said in the IRB, you have to reconsent. It could get kind of tough. The future is the following. I'm not going to say too much about it, but there's going to be a lot more space flight participants with SpaceX and Blue Origin and others. And so those are going to be private individuals. And I can tell you that from what I've heard, a lot of them are very willing to be instrumented and share their data with researchers. And so for the moment, you know, your best bet is to connect with a researcher that's collected analog studies. And a lot of those people, you know, in some cases are astronaut-like populations. And the future, hopefully it'll be private astronauts.
Thank you.
Great question. So the next question we have is kind of about like high schoolers and getting involved and like planning your career path, trying to enter this field. So Lauren, if you want to ask your question.
So first of all, I'm a high school student, so I was wondering how I could get involved, because I know a lot of these programs have a minimum age limit on them, and I'm not quite at that age yet. So how can I start getting involved?
There's no age limit on being involved with us. You can be involved with us. You can participate, post things and do things in our orbit. You can listen to our workshops. You can contribute. I think the SEDS opportunity might go down to high school. As I mentioned in the beginning, I don't know if you were on earlier, we just did a partnership with SEDS. And I think somebody said what that was, but it's an educational organization. And again, if you reach out to me, I can connect you with Rachel. Rachel is our head of education and communication, and she will plug you in. So there's no age limit. You know, this is open to everybody. I don't think that just because you're a certain age, your voice doesn't matter. You have something to contribute, and we'd love to have you. Thank you for the question.
You're welcome.
Yeah, SEDS is the Students for Exploration and Development of Space. Yeah. And also the Space Grant Advisory Council. I know that we have some members from that here, from SGAC. Also, and this will be in the next WAM email, applications for internships at NASA have opened. They're open to all full-time students with a GPA of 3.0 or higher, and there are international opportunities. So any US student can apply, and there are 16 countries that have made agreements with NASA that will allow you to apply for NASA internships. And all of these are essentially online now. Very few of them are in person, for the reasons Dr. Donoviel explained. So yes, there's a change in what's available and how we access it, but also access has in some ways expanded because of this. It's had to. So we're all adapting and adjusting, and though life may go back to the way it was in some ways, I hope we get to keep that, so that, you know, those of us who can't fly to Florida or Pasadena or Houston can still participate and build our CVs and be a part of the community. Well, speaking of that, it's been an hour and 15. We're all still here, and I'm so happy to see that, but I'm sure everyone has things they need to do with their Sunday, Dr. Donoviel as well. And is there any last questions or anything anyone wants to say at this time? Okay, the recording of this will be available on YouTube. I'll be uploading it as soon as I can. I'll give everyone the link to that. Along with the next email, we'll all have the link to join the Australian Mars contingent for their space health thing, which is happening tomorrow and the next day, and as well as some resources for SEDS. The paper that I spoke about, or the paper from the Chang-E radiation measurements, was published in Science last month. Zhang et al. I'd be happy to include that paper for those of you who are interested. And let's talk over WhatsApp, over email. Keep in touch with us. Our next speaker is a month from now. But make sure you filled out your mentorship or WAM member form so that we can match you with a mentor if you need one, provide you with mentees if you need them, and help get you research if that's what you need. Make sure that your voices are heard and represented. Everybody, thank you so much for Dr. Donoviel for coming. We're gonna jazz hands, clap, whatever it is you like to do. And thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Dr. Donoviel.